What if the deepest ache of your unraveling, not the sharp stab of loss, but the slow, inexorable pull toward dissolution, found voice in scales that gleam like forbidden invitations, a siren's murmur tasting of salt and surrender on your lips, the ocean's chill fingers tracing your veins like veins of ice in a lover's grasp, the briny reek of waves crashing with the faint, coppery undernote of blood long spilled, and visions fracturing into abyssal blues where your reflection drowns twice over. This is the vertigo of being craved, not for your light but for the exquisite ruin you embody, echoing Anderson's Little Mermaid who traded voice for legs, only here the bargain inverts. Fins for a feast, desire devouring the self in a tide that mirrors the orphan's silent vow after Hiroshima's shadow. Asterisk let me fade, let me be taken, for what remains is hunger unmet star. On October 2, 2025, as equinox winds carried the scent of upheaval through autumn's veil, Watashi with Tabetai, Hitodenashi. Asterisk this monster wants to eat me asterisk. Unspooled its inaugural episode, the first crest in a serialized wave of 12 that plunges from manga's ink-stained shores into animated depths, inaugurating an arc where human fragility collides with mythic appetites. From the threshold, it ensnares with a hush that's both balm and blade. A girl adrift in widow's weeds, her gaze lost to horizons that swallow whole families, encounters a silhouette from fathoms below, elegant, ravenous, promising an end that's intimate as a kiss. It's intriguing, this prelude of languid swells and veiled vows, teasing the alchemy of predation and protection without baring its teeth, like the first pearl from an oyster's wound, smooth yet harboring grit. Have you ever stood at water's edge, waves lapping like unanswered pleas, wondering if dissolution might feel like homecoming? That's the siren call here. Not the tale itself, but the thrum in your pulse demanding why her, why now, why this exquisite peril. Lean in. The sea hungers, and so might you. In a coastal hamlet where the sea's murmur mocks the silence of emptied homes. Episode 1 resurrects Hinako Yados from the manga's shadow genesis. Chapter 1's elegy of orphanhood, where a family's cataclysmic plunge leaves her sole survivor, echoing the widows of tsunamis who clutch driftwood prayers, thrusting her into a nocturnal promenade that births both peril and pact. No antecedent episodes anchor this debut. It's a solitary immersion, bridging the source's introspective grief to a forward surge of supernatural entanglement. Hinako, hollowed by survivor's salt, wanders shores that whisper her name in foam, only to draw a beast from the brine, claws and hunger incarnate, met by an intervention as graceful as it is grotesque. A mermaid emerges, scales shimmering like gilt-forged armor, claiming dominion not through chains but a vow etched in twilight, sustenance deferred, guardianship granted, until ripeness beckons. Fleeting vignettes unfold, candlelit vigils in rooms that echo with ghosts, the sting of antiseptic on wounds that mirror inner fissures, unveiling a world where human frailty scents the air like chum, luring abyssal kin. Allies flicker in peripheral glow, a classmate's tentative orbit, a sibling's spectral warmth in faded photos, all funneling toward a horizon where consent blurs with compulsion. It's a coiled spring, this episode, from desolation's doldrums to destiny's drag, strands trailing like kelp. What elixir courses her veins, summoning such singular relish? How does a predator's pledge reshape the prey's pulse? You tread those pebbled paths beside her, spray misting your face like unshed tears, the night's chill coiling around your ankles, pulse quickening to the rhythm of unseen depths. The fade to black leaves barbs embedded, subtle, savage, compelling you to submerge, to taste the answers that brine the blood. The episode carves forward like a tide eroding cliffs, measured, merciless, adapting manga's chapters 1 to 2 into a narrative artery that pulses from bereavement's stasis to symbiotic snare, sans the source's expansive internal reveries. Revelations simmer rather than erupt, the accident's spectral weight, Hinako's anomalous allure as delicacy incarnate, a mermaid's archaic covenant, building to a cliffhanger that hums with hushed menace. Silhouettes converging on moonlit strands, vows teetering on violation's brink, much like the novel's early escalations where monster incursions foreshadow societal schisms. No convoluting twists yet, pacing luxuriates in liminal spaces, balancing dramatic hush with visceral spikes. The attack's frenzy a counterpoint to contemplative coasts, evoking the deliberate drag of the Shape of Water's courtship, where tension accrues in every unspoken glance, fan-queried cloudy aspects, Shiori's deferred devouring, predatory whim or prophetic rite, Hinako's irresistible essence, curse or cosmic jest, dissipate under manga's lantern. Chapter 1 elucidates her physiology as a rare mermaid's quarry, bloodline tied to abyssal lore where select humans mature as sustenance for elder kin, a safeguard against extinction's maw. The anime's veiled sigils and Shiori's ritualistic restraint nod to this without belaboring, clarifying the adaptation segment as instinct's ironic leash. Its researched propulsion, this arc, transforming enigmas into echoes. Recall the ambiguity of Oppenheimer's bomb, that gift of annihilation cloaked in salvation? Here, it invites you to probe the the undertow, unearthing layers that bind the frame. Hinako crystallizes as Psyche's submerged ruin, her grief a coral reef of suppressed sobs, motivations rooted in manga's unspoken indictment, survivor's guilt as self-erasure, choices like shore wandering a quiet insurrection against vitality's theft. We unearth wounds in microtremors, a hand lingering on doorframes that once framed laughter, dialogue sparse yet seismic, surprising in its raw acquiescence to fate's fong. Shirori, the scaled enigma, unfurls with predatory poise masking nascent tenderness. Manga's chapter 2 hints at her isolation's mirror to Hinako's, a growth from feral claim to conflicted custodianship, her utterances consistent in archaic formality yet transformative in their tethering touch, their evolutions resonate as alchemical. Hinako's nod to the inevitable, less capitulation than cathartic yield. Shiori's restraint, a fissure in instinct's armor. Were they surprising? Profoundly, echoing the quiet metamorphoses in our own bereavements, where a stranger's grasp becomes anchor. I was struck by how their silences spoke volumes. What hidden fracture in you might yield to such a savage solace? Consumption emerges not as trope but as existential sacrament. Does being devoured affirm worth, or eclipse the self in another's abyss? It throbs in Hinako's inertia, grappling oblivion's allure, her choices a dialectic of surrender and subtle defiance, and Shiori's hungers, pitting instinct's morality against emergent empathy, where sacrifice inverts to survival's strange grace. Hope flickers against despair's undertow, manifesting in pacts that probe can predation birth protection, destruction nurture desire? Beyond labels, a resonance akin to Sartre's gaze, where the other's hunger remakes the observed into object and oracle, its philosophy fleshed in fin and flesh, urging us toward our own abyssal audits. In the devouring dark, what part of you yearns to be claimed whole? Laura creets like barnacles on keel, a coastal veil where mermaids embody antiquity's remnants, predators bound by lunar cycles and blood oaths, humans unwitting lures in an ecosystem of eldritch equilibria, complicating the universe with manga strata of veiled clans and maturation rites, enriching without encumbrance. The sea shifts from mere motif to myth engine, its rules a lattice of hunger hierarchies that ensnare as they illuminate. The script slices with scalpel's mercy, poetic in its paucity, lines like Shiori's vow, I've come to savor you, cliché shy, laced with foreshadow salt, impactful as ancient koans that echo post-credits like wolf's waves into the lighthouse, profound in their pull toward the deep. Weight accrues in whispers, resonance in the unsaid, Hinako's fractured affirmations carrying the heft of confessional diaries. It's writing that lingers like tide pools, each phrase a ripple. What utterance from your shadowed hours might summon the depths, bidding them taste your truth? Art direction conjures an aqueous elegy, fluid lines undulating like kelp in current, symbolism in cerulean palettes, blues bleeding to bruised indigos, evoking Munch's screeches submerged, where lighting fractures on scales like fractured memories, shadows elongating grief's grasp. Stillness in Hinako's stares amplifies isolation's void, movement in Shiori's glide a ballet of barely leashed fury. Beauty here signifies fragility's allure, shaping impact as a siren's lure, seductive, sorrowful compositions frame as submerged portraits. Low sweeps mirroring drowning's disorientation, intimate close-ups on quivering lips sinking to emotional swells, editing's rhythm a lullaby laced with menace. Lingering dissolves that amplify tension, akin to Tar's temporal expanses where every breath burdens. It mirrors Psyche's. Hinako's world contracting to waves, Shiori's expanding in iridescent arcs. Keiji Inai's OST haunts as tidal specter. Standouts, these performances. Not mimicry, but metamorphosis, voices that submerge you wholly. This episode etches with an ache that's exquisite excision. Grief's weight settled in my lungs like swallowed seawater, wonder igniting in the paradox of peril's embrace. Moments of moonlit packs leaving crescents of curiosity, scars of empathy for the devouring desired. I felt adrift, unmoored in Hinako's hollows, mirroring my own tides of loss where hope crests unforeseen. Veiled in shadow, the crux unfolds as appetites entwining in abyssal ballet, a rupture where human and horror converge, paradigms inverting like the Titanic's plunge birthing legends from wreckage. It echoes eternally. In consumption's covenant, do we find redemption or ruse? You bear it etched in sinew, this resonance, philosophical currents tugging at moorings. What submerged craving in your depths might surface, scales agleam, if only granted voice. The pull persists, inexorable. Yield, and let it wash you clean. Through reverse lens, the languor, fans decry as sparsity. Recasts as masterful mimicry of melancholia's mire. A thematic tide that immerses rather than inundates, echoing manga's contemplative cadence. Opacity in lore's fringes risks bewilderment, yet its deliberate dusk, fostering fascination akin to gothic veils that unveil in layers. Vocal peaks occasionally crest contrived, but this tempers the ethereal, grounding myth in murmur. Appreciation prevails, nuanced critique yields to a spell that's sorrowful powerfully sublime. Flaws as facets in a mosaic of mournful majesty. Episode 1 triumphs in atmospheric alchemy and thematic tendrils. Its souls stutter a nascent reticence that ripens into revelation. It alchemizes predation's premise into poignant parable, succeeding resoundingly in narrative nuance and artistic allure. To forego viewing is to deny the deep its due. The shore recedes, waves lap insistent at your feet. What if this mermaid's gaze held your reflection? Hunger honed to the heart's hidden hollows. The screen shimmers, surrender to the swell, and emerge, perhaps, anew. What if salvation arrived not as a lighthouse piercing the fog of your unraveling, but as a predator's patient gaze, scales iridescent under classroom fluorescence that hum like distant hymns, the faint tang of kelp and chalk dust mingling on your tongue, fingertips brushing yours with a coolness that seeps like ink into parchment skin, the brine's whisper carrying echoes of hearth fires long quenched, and horizons blurring where schoolyard laughter fractures against the sea's unyielding sigh. This is the paradox of being tended like a rare vintage, ripened for ruin, evoking the quiet cultivation of Anne Frank's diary. Pages filled with stolen joys amid encroaching shadows, where hope's fragile bloom invites the very jaws that promise release. A death wish, dressed in the banalities of bentos and bells, yet laced with the thrill of fangs deferred, on October 9, 2025, as harvest moons cast silver nets over equinox tides. Watashi with Tabetai, Hitodenashi. Asterisk this monster wants to eat me asterisk. Unfurled Episode 2, the second swell in a 12-episode current that eddies from the manga's ink-deep grief toward yokai-veiled intimacies, bridging the premiere's abyssal pact to shores of reluctant routine. It intrigues with a hush that's half harbor lullaby, half siren snare, a transfer student's seamless infiltration, friendships fraying like nets in storm, and analogies that curdle milk in the gut, teasing the alchemy of care and carnage without unleashing the tide. Like the first hesitant steps after Pompeii's ash settled, where survivors clutched at normalcy's embers, it leaves you adrift in the shallows, spray beating on your lashes, pulse sinking to the rhythm of unspoken hungers. Have you ever felt a hand extend not to pull you from the waves, but to guide your drift toward deeper blue? That's the vertigo here, not the devourer's decree, but the ache to fathom how such tenderness tastes of teeth. Wade in. The current tugs, insistent, alive with what-ifs that demand your gaze, threading from Episode 1's moonlit covenant, where Shiori's vow to claim Hinako hung like a fisherman's line in the fog. This installment reels the narrative into daylight's deceptive calm, echoing the widows of thalidomide scandals who wove normalcy from normalized nightmares, only to feel the pull beneath. Hinako resumes her spectral routine in a seaside school's salt-stung halls, her orbit disrupted by Shiori's audacious arrival as transfer kin, scales veiled in pleated skirts. Miko, the effervescent anchor of yesteryears, orbits closer, her whimsy a buoy against the undertow, as vignettes of shared lunches and lingering glances unfurl, each a ripple in the pond of passivity, laced with metaphors that twist nurture into something sinuous, subtle escalation surface. Protective posturings amid adolescent eddies, flashbacks flickering like bioluminescent lures to the family's engulfed yawl, and invitations extended like baited hooks to a festival where lanterns might mimic lures for larger prey. It transitions forward with deceptive languor, from pack's portent to partnership's peril, strands trailing like seaweed. What farmer's calculus weighs a soul's savor? How does jealousy season the sea's salt? You sit there in the desk-scarred wood, the chalk dust haze settling on your tongue, laughter bubbling like air from drowned lungs, wondering if your own veiled voids would yield to such solicitous shadows. The credits crest, but the questions submerge, cold, coiling, luring you back to the depths for breaths you didn't know you craved. Episode 2 advances like a tide pooling in tide pools before the swell. Introspective, accretive, adapting manga's chapters 3 to 4 into a mosaic of mundane menace that tempers the premiere's primal plunge with relational ripples, sans the source's labyrinthine reveries on yokai hierarchies. Revelations distill to a chilling core, the livestock analogy, wherein Shiori frames her guardianship as agrarian artifice, nurturing Hinako's flavor through vitality's veneer, propelling the arc from isolated oath to entangled everyday, with a cliffhanger humming in festival's festive facade, lanterns aglow with yokai whispers, alliances teetering like lanterns on wind-lashed wires. No seismic twists capsize the frame. Instead, subtle pivots, seating shuffles as territorial tides, Miko's unease as emergent eddy, balance dramatic hush with heartfelt heaves, pacing a deliberate drift that evokes the languid build of the Virgin Suicides, where Ennui's eddy masks maelstrom, fan-fretted, cloudy aspects, Shiori's deferred devouring, whim or wager on worthier yield, Miko's Asusora, yokai kin or kinskeeper, the accidents occluded embers, mere mishap or merfolk metal, Clear via manga's Chapter 3 Codex. Hinako's rarity as prime quarry demands peak vitality for palatability. Per yokai edicts where stress sours the sucker, a restraint the anime amplifies through Shiori's solicitous stares. Miko's talisman-toting tension hints at latent lore, unveiled later as guardian guise, resolving queries with contextual currents drawn from the source's stratified seas. Its erudite ebb, this progression, alchemizing murk to magnetism. Recall the fog-shrouded inquiries of the turn of the screw, where ambiguity invites the abyss. Here, it beckons you to chart the charts yourself, compass quivering. Hinako deepens as Psyche's sunken galleon. Her passivity a barnacle-crusted hull, motivations moored in manga's maladaptive guilt. Survivor scars as self-sabotage. Choices like bentos baked for Miko's mirth a spectral tether to tenancy. Wounds weep in whispers. A hearth's echo in hollowed halls. Dialogue desiccated yet damning. Surprising in its subtle spark. A flicker of reciprocity amid resignation. Shirori surfaces with scaled subtlety. Her pragmatism a pearl in peril's oyster. Manga's chapter for unveils isolations inverse to Hinako's. Growth from gluttonous claim to conflicted curator. Utterances unyielding yet yielding ground in tender tutorials on human hues. Miko bursts as countercurrent. Her buoyancy belying buried barbs. Jealous jabs consistent in comic cadence. Transformative in apologies that anchor without anchoring down. Their arcs alchemize as tidal. Hinako's hesitant handclasp, less surrender than subtle surge. Shiori's naive probes, fissures in finned facade. Were they transformative? Unearthingly, mirroring the quiet quickenings in Never Let Me Go's clones, where care carves canyons in conditioned calm. I personally was struck by Miko's mirth masking her own masked aches. What submerged solicitous in your circle might mirror such buoyant burdens? Predation transmutes to pastoral paradox. Does husbandry heal or hollow the herd, rendering ruin exquisite? It pulses in Hinako's haze, wrestling welfare's wolf in wool. Her yields a dialectic of despair and dawning desire, and Shiori's schema, morality's mermaid not where sacrifice seasons survival, hope's hesitant tide against yokai's yawning despair. Beyond banners, it manifests in Miko's meddlesome mirth, a Lebanesian face demanding response amid the void. Asterisk, can consumption catalyze communion? The devoured dictate the devouring? Asterisk, resonant as Nietzsche's abyss gazing back, yet laced with Yuri's yearning gaze. Its throw-made philosophy, binding bonds to our own brackish bargains. In the farmer's field of feeling, what crop of you ripens for reaping? Lore layers like nacre on nucleus. Yokai veiled in vocational veils, festivals as liminal lures where human harmonies harmonize with hidden hungers, complicating the cosmos with manga's chapter 4 codicils of flavor casts. Humans as harvest, mermaids as meticulous mariculturists, enriching the ether without entanglement. The school shifts from sanctuary to subtle snare, its rules a reef of repressed revelations that ensnare as they expand. Script shimmers sharp as abalone shell, poetic in its predatory precision, lines like Shiori's livestock litany cliché cleansed, freighted with foreshadows foam, impactful as incantations that linger post-lull like Dickinson's dashes, terse, tensile, teasing the terror beneath the trivial. Resonance ripples in retorts, such as Miko's merry deflections carrying confessional cadence. Its prose that praise, each utterance an undertow. What bartered banter from your banquet of bonds might betray the beast within? Artistry evokes an estuary's elegy. Fluid fusions of foreground focus and fluid fades, symbolism in sapphire sheens, ceruleance curdling to cinder grays, channeling Hopper's hollowed habiliments, where lighting limbs longings lace, shadows schooling like sardines in sorrow's slipstream. Stillness in Hinako's stares sculpts stasis's sting, movement in Miko's mischief a maelstrom of manic mirth. Beauty bespeaks brittleness, shaping sentiment as a scythe's caress, poignant, predatory, frames flow as finned reverie, overheads on handholds mirroring meshed destinies, intimate insets on iris's iridescing emotions estuary, editing's ebb a elegiac pulse, prolonged pans amplifying ache, akin to Anderson's wistful wide angles where whimsy wars woe. It echoes essences, Hinako's vista contracting to classroom confines, Shiori's expanding in enigmatic expanses, OST oracles as oceanic oracle, motifs of muted marimbas murmuring through swells of string-swept surges, elevating analogies to anthem's edge, silence in school day interstices shriller than siren scream. Exemplars, these enactments. Voices not voicing but viscerating, submerging souls in sounds saline. This episode eviscerates with an elegance that's equal parts embrace and evisceration. Levity's lift buoyed my breath like flotsam in flood, yet unease's undertow tugged at tendons, moments of mirrored hands leaving ligatures of longing, scars of surrogate sisterhood sparking speculative shivers. I felt fissured, adrift in Hinako's hollows yet hooked by Shiori's hook, echoing my own eddies of ennui where camaraderie crests unforeseen. Shrouded in subtlety, the zenith zips as affinities anastomosing in auroral ambiguity, a schism where savior and scavenger entwine, trajectories tilting like the lucid Lusitania's list birthing ballads from brine. It reverberates. In the harvest of the heart, does husbandry herald healing or harvest? You harbor it, this heft, philosophical flotsam fetching at fences. What veiled vintage in your vineyard waits for the vinedresser's verdict? The swell surges, unslakable, submerge, and savor the salt of secrets, reverse-gazing the grooves. Repetition's reticence, fans flag as fatigue in Hinako's reiterated rue, reframes as rhythmic requiem, a stylistic simulacrum of stagnation's snare, echoing manga's meditative mire to marinate melancholy's marrow. Passivity's pall might palliate plot's propulsion, yet its thematic tether, fostering fixation akin to Gothic gardens where growth germinates in gloom. Comedic chibis clash cacophonously at crescendos, but this juxtaposition jars judiciously, leavening lament with levity's lash. Admiration anchors, tempered tally tilts to triumph, imperfections as iridescence in an opal of ominous opulence. Episode 2 excels in empathetic eddies and enigmatic entanglements, its whisper-thin weakness a wistful wander in uncharted urchins. It consummates its craft, transmuting Yuri's yoke into yokai's yearning, narrative nuance netted with nocturnal nuance. To evade viewing is to elude the estuary's enticement. The festival fires flicker, fins finessing from the fray. What if this scaled shepherdess sheared your shadows, husbandry honing the heart's hidden harvest? The waves wait, whispering, yield to their yield, and taste the terroir of tomorrow.